Mike Reiss is the author of Springfield Confidential, Jokes, Secrets, and Outright Lies from a Lifetime Writing for The Simpsons, and he joins us today from New York City. Hello, sir.
Hi, it's great to be here. Great to be back. I was on your show a couple of years ago.
Yes. Congratulations on being asked back. Thank you for the book. It is so much fun to read. And it's not something I read from cover to cover. It's a great thing to just jump around.
Like Tolstoy, I write to be read on the toilet.
As a vegetarian, I'm not a toilet reader. So it's.
I really did. I wrote the book. I said, this is the kind of book I read. I like small bits of things. I like to jump around. There's nothing more than 3 pages, and almost everything is a half a page.
Right. Most of my books are toilet rights. You must have written this on the toilet. Springfield Confidential. It's the story not just of The Simpsons, but your story in a lifetime of writing comedy. What is the first joke you ever wrote? Not the first joke you ever sold, not the first joke that you liked, but what is the first joke that you can remember writing and saying, I just wrote a joke?
You know, it just hit me the other day. I remember it, and you won't believe it, I think, because it's a pretty sophisticated joke. There were 2 salesmen in my town, Mr. Rosenberg and Mr. Friedman. And so I told my mom, oh, Mr. Rosenberg met Mr. Friedman at the play Death of a Salesman. And he said, I wish we could have met under better circumstances.
Okay.
How's that?
How old were you?
I mean, I was like 7. I mean, I had heard the phrase, oh, I wish we could have met at better circumstances. And then the other joke, just like that, was I said, oh, Rabbi, there was the movie The Bible. John Huston made a movie called The Bible. And
another great toilet read, by the way.
Yes. And that was it. I said, oh, our rabbi walked out of the movie The Bible and said, I like the book better.
That's a great joke.
That's a decent joke.
How old were you when you wrote that joke?
Again, it was like 6 or 7. One more joke is significant. I said, no man is an island, but Dom DeLuise comes close.
That's a great joke.
That is a joke I wrote. Again, maybe I was 8 when I wrote that, and then 15 years later, I'm writing for Johnny Carson, and I'm stuck, and I go, I'll give him this joke I wrote when I was 8, and it got a big laugh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, I am the Mozart of one-liners.
Didn't your father take you around to all the kings and princes of Europe, and you would tell jokes to them with a white wig on?
That is correct. Yes.
Yes. Were you a comedy prodigy? Did your parents identify you early on as funny?
I remember when I was, again, first grade or something, my report card came back, and the teacher said, Mike keeps us laughing all the time. And my mother said, what? She just had no idea I was kind of a funny kid. And I mean, I got to specify, I wasn't the class clown. I wasn't goofing around. I was just making jokes. I was the Dick Cavett of first grade, So.
The Dick Cavett of first grade. So there was a funnier class clown.
Yes. Yeah, and I would actually write for the class clown. My best friend was a guy named Kyle who was had a big personality, and I'd go, "Hey, Kyle, here's this. Hey, here's something you should say, Kyle," and he would do my stuff.
How much of this is true?
100%.
Seriously, you really wrote for the class clown. You're not making that up.
I wrote for the class clown. He's still my friend. I'm 50 years later. I'll be seeing him in a couple of months. I'll slip him some jokes. That was it. I had these ideas, but I was an extremely shy, quiet kid. I'm still very shy, and I'm just sort of kind of get thrust into the spotlight a little more. But That was it. I've always just wanted to be a writer. I've never for a moment did I want to be a performer or a comedian. Here's another one. When I was a kid listening to a Tom Lehrer live album, and he tells a joke. I'll even tell the joke. You like jokes. He's talking about Lyndon Johnson, and he goes, his policy in Vietnam is he's starting to feel like a Christian Scientist with appendicitis. Now, that's a fantastic joke, and certainly I didn't get it. I was 10 years old. I didn't get anything about. I didn't even know who Lyndon Johnson was, but I heard this giant laugh on the record, and I said, I wish I wrote that. I never wished I was Tom Lehrer. I didn't want to be telling it, but I go, oh, I wish I had wrote that and handed it to him.
I'm thinking of the David Levine cartoon for the New York Review of Books, where LBJ lifts up his shirt to reveal his gallbladder surgery scar, and it was Vietnam. Do you remember that?
I remember it very well. Again,
was that
very striking image. I saw it when it came out, didn't know what it meant. You know, you keep these things in your head, and it was like 30 years later, oh, now I get it.
Jokes should not always be accessible to the audience.
Is that how you defend a bad set?
My life. That's how I defend my life.
I agree, though. Certainly what we do on The Simpsons constantly is we're parodying Citizen Kane or something, and we know the 8-year-olds in the audience aren't going, oh, Citizen Kane. I like these jokes that, we never do a joke for ourselves. We never do an in-room joke, but we'll do a joke for 1% of the audience and knowing they'll really have a great time getting it.
And is the hope that over time, since my kids have watched every episode of The Simpsons at least 100 times, that as they age, they'll understand more of The Simpsons? Is that the idea behind it?
No, that was never. No, you couldn't be wronger. This interview is over. I say it in the book. I'll jump into the book for a sec, which was, and I say it over and over again. When we started on The Simpsons, nobody wanted to work on the show. They couldn't find writers, and nobody thought it was going to last more than 6 weeks. So we said, all right, let's just fill it with stuff that makes us laugh. And that's from that time to this, that's our criterion. What makes the people in the room laugh? We don't care if kids are going to get it. We don't care if Texans are going to get it. We just try and entertain ourselves. And if it's a joke too obscure, all right, there'll be another joke in 5 seconds, and you'll get that one.
At one time, running The Simpsons, you were reading like 800 spec scripts a year.
Yeah. Yes, I can picture it in front of me. Just this giant, it literally looked like the Twin Towers. It was 2 giant stacks of spec scripts. I don't know if everybody in the audience gets that concept that if you wanted, back then at least, if you wanted to break into TV writing, you had to write a sample episode of an existing TV show, Cheers or Seinfeld or Newhart, something like that. And that's your writing sample, and it shows a showrunner, oh, you can think of a good story, you can write for existing characters, you can write jokes. And so I read 800 of those every year, in fact, 800, to find maybe 8 good writers. And when you found the good writers, you'd call the agents, and the agent would say, oh, he's got 5 offers already. So when you hit a good one, everybody in town knew it.
Wouldn't it have been more efficient to not read the 800 spec scripts?
It's a funny business. This hit me the other day that to get into show business, you already have to be really good at it. I mean, that was the thing. No other business is like that, where I want a job as a heart surgeon, so you have to go in and do a heart transplant to impress the boss. But that's it. I had to read a script by somebody who already knew how to do it well. And that's how it worked. And it shows you, and again, another good thing is it shows you it's not that hard. It seems hard, but it's not something you have to study. You don't have to go to school for it. There are just certain people who know how to write TV, and they do it, and they're good at it from the first time they try it.
Who figure it out all by themselves.
Yeah. Right.
Well, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'll stop jumping on you. The first season of The Simpsons, except for Al Jean and myself, we were a writing team. None of those writers had ever written a script before.
That's what I was going to ask you.
It's amazing, and it never occurred to me till now, but it shows you how hard it was to find writers, how few people wanted to work on the show. We hired all novices. Nobody had ever written anything longer than an 8-page sketch. And they came in and wrote that first season of The Simpsons, and every one of them was just expert at it immediately and wrote these kind of classic episodes.
Okay, so that was the question I was going to ask you, because you came from the Harvard Lampoon, and then your first job, I believe, was writing for The Tonight Show. You were a joke guy originally.
Yeah.
Then you ended up working in sitcoms, Alf and The Critic. You created The Critic. You're saying that The Simpsons began with joke writers who learned story.
Well, that was it. I mean, I wish I could say we crafted them. We certainly had brilliant guys at the top, James L. Brooks, and Sam Simon, just these two masters of the sitcom form. But I'm telling you, these guys came in and wrote great scripts immediately. That's how I think you write TV. It's how you write anything, is you just watch a lot of it. You're not even studying it. You're not analyzing it. You just like it. I mean, all the Simpsons writers, I have a guess, were like me, watching 8 hours of TV a day. And you're just osmosing it. You're seeing how it's sort of built. You're understanding what you like and what you don't like and what you would do and what you wouldn't do. And that's it. But I'm telling you, every single one of these guys wrote great scripts on their first at bat.
You recommend books about comedy. One of the books you recommended, and it's Gary Marshall's autobiography, Wake Me When It's Funny. His first piece of advice, which I never took, was don't dress better than your boss.
Are you one of these dapper guys?
I'm a dandy.
You're a dandy.
The second thing he said is, I think you're saying this, is that anybody can be taught story, but very few guys can come up with the jokes.
The story is certainly the hardest thing we have to do at this point. I mean, after 30 years, 3 plots an episode, we've done 2,000 stories, and you have to come in and come up with the 2001st best story anyone's ever heard. So that's really hard.
On The Simpsons, does the story take on the characteristics of a joke?
It's sort of like that, because it's never even a story. It's never a fairy tale. It's like, I'll give you something. Someone came in 16 years into the run of the show and said, Homer becomes a Catholic because he realizes he can be bad all week and then do penance at the end of the week and get a clean slate. And I go, that's an idea. Holy cow. And once you hear an idea like that, it's like an old newspaper movie. You go, start the presses, boys. Let's start cranking out the jokes. Homer's a Catholic this week.
How many pitches does it take to get one idea produced?
Usually there's not a lot. What happens is we do a thing called a story retreat. We do 1 or 2 of these a year where all the writers get together in a room, and we have James L. Brooks there. It's very hard to pin the guy down, but we get him in a nice room.
You wrestle him?
Yes, we do. We shoot him up with narcotics. we tape it. You remember King of Comedy? We duct tape him to the chair.
Do you go on a vacation? Where do you go for this retreat?
We tweet. We go to a very nice place.
Hunting stories.
Yeah. We used to get a hotel suite on the ocean. It used to be this sort of real getaway. And it was because we needed to get Jim Brooks away from the office, away from his secretaries and phones. And this was pre-cell phone. That's how old the fucking Simpsons is. We predate the internet. We predate cell phones. So we'd get this beautiful hotel suite we'd have a buffet come in, and we'd all sit in this place, and then every one of us, the whatever 10 or 20 writers were little Willy Lomans, and we had 5 minutes to make our pitch, and you'd go in.
It's sad that you have to meet under such sad circumstances.
That's a good joke. Everyone comes in with their best pitch, and then they'll have a backup pitch. But that's it. We have about 20 writers on staff, and we do about 20 shows a year. So everybody only needs one good idea a year.
The first joke that you sold, I assume, would be to Johnny Carson?
No, my first job was at National Lampoon. My first job, and in fact, I got that job during college. I was at Harvard, at the Harvard Lampoon, and I sent in an article to National Lampoon, which I think they bought and didn't run, and it was called Born Again Pagans. And, not bad. It was a new term back then.
Jimmy Carter was around the Carter time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So Born Again Pagans, and I sold that, and that was it. And then the National Lampoon called the Harvard Lampoon to speak to me and Al Jean, and they said, "We love what you're doing in the Harvard Lampoon." And we said, "You read the Harvard Lampoon?" They said, "Oh, we've been reading it for years. We just never saw anything good before." So.
Okay, so you went to Harvard.
Yes.
You were on the Harvard Lampoon.
Correct. That's why I went.
Did you run the Harvard Lampoon?
I became president of the Harvard Lampoon.
So you're like Benchley or Conan.
Exactly. Yes, they were both. They were presidents. George Plimpton, John Updike, and best of all, Fred Gwynne.
Really?
Herman Munster. Fred Gwynne was the president of the Harvard Lampoon.
Fred Gwynne was, growing up, there was the divide between the Munsters and the Addams family. And I always chose in arguments the Munsters. I always said the Munsters was funnier than the Addams family. And my friends were saying, you're being a contrarian. The Addams family has the pedigree of the New Yorker behind it. Charles Addams. This is much more sophisticated. And I always said Fred Gwynne was a better actor than John Astin, who played Gomez.
It hit me today. I go, because I don't know why. I was thinking, I know. I woke up thinking this. I go, Lily Munster clearly cheated on Herman Munster. That she's a vampire and gave birth to a wolf man, and her husband's Frankenstein. Clearly, she fucked the wolf man.
I have John Shuck's phone number. They can bring back the Munsters again.
Wow.
And we can get Lee Grant. Didn't Lee Grant and John Shuck try to bring back the Munsters?
They were the new Munsters, yes. Wow.
Okay.
And then, they were going to do a Black Munsters, too. I think the Wayans brothers made a deal to do a Black Munsters, but that never happened.
That would have been great. So you were president of the Harvard Lampoon.
Correct.
What year?
1980. My co-president, I don't know why I'm trying to steal credit from him, was John Vitti, who was also one of the original Simpsons writers.
What percentage of Harvard comedy writers are funny, and what percentage of Harvard comedy writers in Hollywood are simply intellectually ambitious, chose comedy because they conducted a cost-benefit analysis and concluded that comedy was the quickest way to get rich? So they're not funny, they're just money-hungry golems. What's the percentage?
Okay, I'm gonna back this up. I'll give you the whole story, which was... It's a legitimate question. People think it's an old boy network, it's a frat, it's all this. And believe me, I'm not defending Harvard, which I wish, would burn to the ground immediately. I have nothing good to say about Harvard, except that I like the Harvard Lampoon. So Harvard Lampoon, for 100 years, never produced a comedy writer.
Robert Benchley.
Well, if you call that comedy.
I agree with you.
It's not comedy. I don't think he's that funny, but it's also, that was New Yorker pieces.
The truth is, the funniest person at the Algonquin table was who?
I've heard the waiter. No, that's not a joke. I heard Frank Crowninshield or something. The owner of the hotel was funny.
But the funniest famous person at the Algonquin table was Harpo Marx.
Right.
That says everything about how unfunny Dorothy Parker and Robert Benchley and S.J. Perelman were. The guy who doesn't speak was remembered as the funniest.
They found out later these people would prep their jokes. Oh, everybody would sweat it hours in advance or days in advance. And how can I... And when you hear the famous stories about the Algonquin, you realize, oh, it was all set up, you know?
Yeah.
Someone said to Dorothy Parker, use the word horticulture in a sentence. It's like, oh, how did that happen? Oh, what luck. She had a great answer for that.
I think we are living in the golden age of overrated, urbane, sophisticated writers. I will match the shouts and murmurs section of The New Yorker to any of those writers who sat around the Algonquin table. My generation of writers are 10 times as unfunny as anybody who sat around the Algonquin.
I have a joke in the book which says, and I believe this, by the way, I say, I can find humor in all things except the humor column of The New Yorker. The woman who edits that column is someone I know. She said, oh, can I see your book? And I gave her the book. And she clearly just passed it off to a junior editor who took a nice excerpt from the book, put it in New Yorker online. I finally kind of got in the New Yorker. But clearly, she never read the book because I attack her at least 2 or 3 times.
I don't think she reads the submissions that she prints.
That may be. I mean, what a surprise. No, I'm not going to go there. But anyway, she's sort of a friend of mine. But
nobody ever gets this after getting published in The New Yorker. Wow, that was funny. They get congratulations. It's like an acceptance letter. You got admitted into The New Yorker. Did anybody ever really read S.J. Perelman?
I like S.J. Perelman. Not only do I like him, I was shocked to see he holds up 80 years later. I think he's still really funny. He wrote jokes. He wrote, it wasn't attitude and tone. He wrote a lot of gags. I think he's okay.
All right, I'll have to go maybe now I can, with my Kindle, I can press the words I don't understand. Were you able to understand what he was talking about? I mean, he went out of his way to use the sesquipedalian language. What is I don't even know what sesquipedalian means.
It's an alligator. I liked him, and certainly the Woody Allen book, Getting Even, was a book. I just knew it by heart. I read that, again, a perfect toilet book, such short pieces, a skinny little book. You could just read it over and over.
Tolstoy, War and Peace for me was a toilet read because I have colitis.
The punchline is, I have colitis.
I wish I had said that at the beginning of the interview because you said something about like Tolstoy.
Like Tolstoy, I like we're recapping the beginning for those of you just tuning in.
Let's fix this in post. Let me just talk to my editor. So when Mike says like Tolstoy,
right to be read on the toilet.
But in my fantasy, I would have said, well, of course I read War and Peace on the toilet because I had colitis. Okay, sorry.
This is how the Algonquin Roundtable.
Moving on. What percentage of Harvard writers are money-hungry golems? And the follow-up on that is, when you count all the beans, has Harvard been a force of good or a force of evil in television comedy?
Okay, I'm going to run through it all. Okay, so for 100 years, nobody got a job in humor from working on the Harvard Lampoon. It was just a fun thing you did in school. And again, Harvard is such an odious place that the funny people found each other and would bunch up in the Harvard Lampoon building, which is literally a castle. They built a castle, and you can imagine them just besieged by the awfulness that is Harvard, and the few funny people at the school would find each other. And all we did, we just make each other laugh all the time. But so up until 1974, so 98 years after the Lampoon was founded, finally a guy named Jim Downey got a job from the Harvard Lampoon working on SNL. And that's what opened the floodgates. Okay, so that's the history of it. People didn't join the Lampoon to get TV jobs. When I was on the Lampoon in the 80s, there was only one other guy working in TV, Andy Borowitz from The New Yorker.
Well, originally from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
That's correct. Then he made enough money off that to afford being able to write for The New Yorker.
Yes.
So that was it. It just wasn't a thing you did to get a job. And Harvard Lampoon, very, very hard to get on. It's not a thing you join. You submit material. You got to turn in 6 articles in 8 weeks. Nobody gets on the first time they try out. I didn't get on the first time. Dave Mandel, who runs the show Veep, one of, maybe the best writer in TV right now, he had to go through the competition 5 times to get on.
What is the competition?
The competition, they give you no guidance. They just go, you have 8 weeks to turn in 6 articles. They don't tell you what to write, what kind of thing. Just turn them in, and we hope they make us laugh. And so 100 people try out every semester, and about 7 people get elected to the staff. And that's the whole gig. So it's very finely vetted. And of those guys on the Harvard Lampoon, it's generally just the top echelon, the guys who were president, like me, president, vice president. The top 4 or 5 writers are the guys who wind up working in TV. So it's a super kind of refined group of writers. And nobody's in it for the money. They're doing this stuff because this is all they're good for. It's the only thing they know how to do in the world. So that being said, and I'll get to the end of my sermon here, the work they're doing is great. I mean, you can be anything you like on TV, they're doing it. Whether it was Letterman, half the Letterman staff was Lampoon guys, SNL, half the Simpsons staff, the entire Futurama staff, most of the staff of Veep and Silicon Valley. All the good shows are just staffed with these Harvard guys.
If I were in charge of a show, I would bring in 20 Harvard kids and see how many of them I could just destroy. Isn't that why they're hired?
That may be. I never know how we're perceived. I never know. There's this subcategory of books written by old SNL performers. Guys like, what the heck's his name? I can't even remember his name. The guy who did the Christopher Walken impression. That guy. And Sarah Silverman, Kevin Nealon. Everybody writes a book, and everyone in the book says, I hated the Harvard writers. All the SNL performers hated the Harvard writers. Maybe they were dicks, maybe they were arrogant, or maybe they didn't write the kind of character stuff that actors love. They just wrote jokes. They wrote funny, conceptual pieces, which is a very good knock on the Harvard writers. They're generally not good at characters, not good at story. They just can crank out a lot of comedy.
You know how there's like black on black violence, Jew on Jew violence, kind of like what's going on right now. Which for some reason it's black on black violence right now. I don't understand why.
People don't know we're both black too. We embrace our Jewishness.
Is there Harvard on Harvard violence? I hope. I sensed it from Conan. Yeah, and I sense it from I don't sense it from you. You've said it in the book.
I hate Harvard. I hate Harvard, not just because I met my wife there.
You have a brilliant wife.
I have a really nice wife.
I watch her videos.
You do?
Yes. You're anthropologists, basically.
Oh, I had no idea you were following her. Oh, isn't that amazing? I should be upset.
You travel around the world and you're anthropologists, essentially.
yeah, my wife likes to go to these places, and I got to go where she is. That's about the size of it. We've been to 114 countries. I didn't want to go to any of them. Maybe England, maybe Paris, and then 112 other countries.
Keep interrupting you about Harvard, so go ahead.
Why? I'm a fascinating man with many facets.
You are, and I'm glad we're not doing it in studio. This way I can really focus on your brain.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I like to think you are on the toilet right now.
Well, we're in the toilet. We're not on it. You write in the book that if a sinkhole gobbled up all of Harvard, we would be better off. But do you really mean that?
I really mean it. I mean, I really have nothing good to say about the place. And I sailed through there for 4 years without one faculty member, teacher, anyone taking any notice of me, saying 5 words to me. And it was a school, I won't go on about this. It was a school that was aggressively useless in its education.
It's a vocational school more. Isn't it about making connections?
I guess so. I mean, that's something it hit me the first week there. I saw everyone just not even networking. That wasn't even a term, but just everybody meeting each other, and they're smart people from different areas and different economic classes. And I go, this should have just been a summer camp. Anything people are getting out of this, they could get out of a good, Jewish Catskills camp. But that was it. The education was like aggressively worthless. Let's make sure there's nothing you can use here. And it worked.
Running a writing room. Take Mel Brooks at the height of his game.
Yeah.
Yesterday. He's still funny.
He is still funny, yeah.
Woody Allen, who...
Huge fan. Huge fan.
All right, let's take a writing room. Mel Brooks, George Meyer, Woody Allen. You're running the room. They are at the height of their prowess, but they need the job. They can't quit. They can't say, take this job and shove it.
Right.
Could you break them in a month? Could you get Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, or George Meyer to doubt that they're funny?
Why would I do that?
Why would you do that? What do you mean, why would you do that? Because it's Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, and George Meyer. And if you can destroy them and they're not funny, then you become great. You fill the vacuum. Pretend I'm offering you millions of dollars to break Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, and George Meyer. You have a month. They need a job. Yeah. And your job is to break them so that they don't think they're funny. Could you do it?
Could I do it? I'm going to ignore the question and make a side point, which is just one thing. It hit me writing the book is The Simpsons is such a pleasant place to work. It is quiet and pleasant. There's no friction. Nobody's competitive. You hear those stories how the Sid Caesar show used to go, where it's just everybody yelling in a room trying to get their joke in. It is nothing like that at The Simpsons. In fact, it's nothing like that on any sitcom I ever worked on, because it's not like stuff is just spewing out of everyone constantly. It's people sitting there thinking, oh, we need this joke. Think. If anybody pitches the joke that gets a laugh and goes in, you go, thank God. Let's move on to the next joke. I'm 10 minutes closer to going home tonight. And that's it. And every 2 or 3 years, they'll send a camera crew to the Simpsons writing room, and they say, let's watch the fireworks. And it's just a bunch of Joey guys pondering. It's the same way the Talmud was written. It's just sad guys sitting in a room thinking.
In Iraq.
Yeah. So that's it. That's what it's like. And people find it hard to believe. And we get notes from the editor. He goes, what about the friction? Or I talked about the job of a showrunner. He goes, what's the politics of people trying to get the job of showrunner? I go, and it never occurred to me. I go, there is none, and nobody wants that job. It's not like a title. In corporate world, sure, you fight to be the president or vice president or something. Nobody wants to run the show. It's no fun at all. One guy Al Jean has been doing it for 20 years, and there's no palace intrigue. There's never been an attempt at a coup to get somebody else in there.
You write what you you write. This made me laugh so hard, and I couldn't believe you said it. What unites Nichols and May with Cheech and Chong is nothing except that they both suck.
Right.
What united Nichols and May with Cheech and Chong?
I was trying to say there's no way to analyze humor, which I believe. What is the secret of humor? What do those two have in common except they both suck? And in fact,
do they?
Well, Nichols and May, hugely overrated. Perfect. Okay, you can listen to them; they're amusing. But when you hear comic scholars talk about them, they're the most brilliant thing you've ever heard in your life, and this is the apogee. And Cheech and Chong, who I grew up with, and it was a big moment for me, because they came around when I was like in 6th grade, and everyone's listening to Cheech and Chong, and I'm going, this sucks. This is not real polished comedy. And over time, I've come to like them more. I actually have a little more respect for Cheech and Chong and less for Nichols and May. If you get a chance, I saw Cheech and Chong live in Vegas, and they were really funny. And Chong was the guy who walked away with it. He was just so on top of things and really funny. So I don't know. I'm not as full of hate as I used to be, but yeah, they both kind of suck.
You travel around the world. I consider you an anthropologist.
Okay.
America's obsession with the inner workings of comedy, would you say that's a leading indicator of a society in decay?
It's just passing over us. And we go, all right, here's our time in the spotlight. It's kind of fun because, 10 years ago, it was angels. That's what we were talking about. We're all seeing angels suddenly. How about that? And before that, it was crystals. And now crystals are coming back. People suddenly realize, crystals are more interesting than Billy Crystal.
Best idea for a TV show that you and Al Jean pitched that never got sold. What was the greatest idea, the funniest idea that never got sold?
Okay, it's not a one-liner, but Al and I had an idea to do a show like the McLaughlin Group. It was a sitcom. We were developing sitcoms for Disney, and we had a sitcom where it's the McLaughlin Group, different pundits talking, and the conservative woman and the liberal guy are secretly dating. And it was just a funny romantic comedy built around this interesting office setting, and we would open the show, it would be a sitcom, but 5 minutes at the top of every show we would record that week, and it would be kind of a timely discussion among pundits. So not a hilarious pitch, but great TV shows aren't hilarious pitches. What's
right.
Cheers? Just people in a bar. It's not, you're not laughing, but that was a great script we wrote. And we turned it over to the executive at Disney, who was the son. He's the head of comedy. He's the head of comedy at Disney, and he was the son of Henry Kissinger. And you know how funny he was.
Well, the Christmas bombings of Hanoi. That still cracks me. Ho, 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 Chi Minh.
So that was it. I heard him on the phone one day trying to sell this, and he goes, "We got this script here. I don't think you're going to like it." I go, "What kind of salesmanship is that?" But that was a great script. He was running Disney, because I was pitching to Pol Pot's daughter over Paramount at the time. Delightful. Daughter was sex pot. So
I'm just trying to get as good as Charlie Rose. There's a vacuum out there now that he's gone.
The one thing that came out of the whole Me Too thing was there were several guys accused of masturbating into plants. And I go, wow, that never occurred to me. I don't even know why that's good. But a lot of guys did that.
They were Venus flytraps. I don't know what that means.
Penis flytraps.
Penis flytraps is much better. Okay. Worst idea for a movie that you never sold.
Oh, wow. I was going to say My Life in Ruins, but I actually sold that. Wow. I don't know. I'd have to think of that. I had one idea called, oh, shoot. What was it called? It was called like 7 Day Cyrus, a pun on 7 Day Virus, which isn't even a term. I don't know where it came from, but it was a guy named Cyrus who's born and he lives a decade a day. So at the end of 7 days, he's 70 years old.
Oh.
7 Day Cyrus.
Like a fruit fly, basically.
Yeah, that was the idea. And I think it just became, I go, that's kind of sad. It really, he has about 3 good days and then he's an old man for the weekend.
If I had 7 days to live, it would mostly be me trying to return a pair of shoes. Get my money back, I think. What was your happiest day on The Simpsons?
Oh, wow. Gosh, we had a lot of good days. I think it was, I'll tell you a good story. We did an episode where it's called Krusty Gets Canceled, for fans of the show, where Krusty gets canceled, then has a big comeback special, and gets every celebrity in the world to be on it. And it was John Swartzwelder had the plot idea, but I said, let's just pack this with celebrities, because we had kind of a long list of celebrities. We couldn't figure out how to use them. And so that it was the episode with Johnny Carson and Elizabeth Taylor, and then a lot of guys who were cool back then. It was Luke Perry and Red Hot Chili Peppers, and anyways, it was a star-studded show, and we're trying to cast this thing, and every celebrity we had fell through, and we couldn't get them. We had Bette Midler, and then she backed out, and we were going to get Reba McEntire, and we didn't even know who she was, and then she pulled out. And I know Al Jean said maybe it's just not going to work. And then at the last minute, Bette Midler came through. And then every couple of weeks, another celebrity would drift in, and we'd get these different celebrities. And it seemed fun, and okay, it's fine. And then we cut it together. And we didn't realize, because it was recorded over about 6 months. And you cut it together, you go, Jesus Christ, that's a lot of celebrities. We're hearing them all in one place and scenes together. Their characters are talking to each other that weren't even in the same room in the same month. So I remember it was like 2 a.m. hearing the first assemblage of that show going, wow, that really worked out.
Wow. That wasn't a day, that was a series of days.
It was, well, no, none of it was happy until I heard it cut together. I'll never forget it again, because it was 2 a.m. That's when the editing work began. That's how hard it was running The Simpsons. I'd already worked from 10 to 2, and it's like, all right, 2 a.m., time to edit the show. And I heard this, I go, oh, that really came together. So that was fun. The other one, I tell the story in the book, was the night of the premiere of the show. We had our premiere show at a bowling alley, because Fox, that's how much faith Fox had in the show. They said, all right, we'll spring for basically a large children's birthday party. And so we're at a bowling alley, and 8 o'clock the show ran, and they showed it on those monitors where they usually project the score. Mm-hmm. And again, this is the first time anyone's seen the show, seen The Simpsons, and we're all watching it going, holy shit, this is good. And none of us had any idea. And it sort of happened, bam, bam, bam. We watched the show. Hey, it's better than we thought. And then the head of publicity came in with the reviews from all over the country, and they were all great. Everybody loved the show. We came into work the next morning. They said, well, you debuted to the highest ratings in the history of the Fox network. So that was a pretty good 12 hours.
Wow.
And I bowled a 128, my highest score.
Worst thing you ever witnessed on The Tonight Show, the most depressing thing you ever saw on The Tonight Show that made you just want to pack up your bags and go back to the East Coast. What did you witness?
The worst thing I ever saw on The Tonight Show was Lucille Ball at age 80. And it was so exciting. Lucy's going to do the Tonight Show, and I'm backstage waiting to see her. And oh my God, I mean,
was this Concrete Pavement? Was she promoting her? Remember that movie of the week she did about a homeless woman?
I believe it was called Stone Pillow, and she was promoting, I think, Life with Lucy. Remember, she came back right at the end at age 80. She and Gail Gordon came back to do another sitcom like days before they died, and it was such a nightmare, that show. Do you remember this at all?
It was Life Support with Lucy.
That was it. Someone had a really funny joke. There were two great jokes about that show. One was they said Gail Gordon had been sitting in the commissary for 20 years waiting for the show to come. Nobody had told them the last Lucy had been canceled. And the other good joke was someone said, all of Lucy's lines are going to be looped by Tom Waits. But that was it. Lucy comes backstage, 80 years old, in a short skirt, and her legs were just like these veiny hockey sticks, and she just looked like the Crypt Keeper in lipstick, and it was really scary. And I mean, it is not a joke. I went home that night and then had a nightmare about it. Oh no, Lucy's trying to kiss me. So that's.
Is that the one where she accused Ed McMahon of passing wind?
Is that? I don't recall.
Yeah, there was one episode late in her life where she accused Ed.
That's an old person's way of blaming the dog.
Who is the happiest Simpsons writer? Not the funniest, but after, 30 years?
Yeah.
Who is the happiest writer that you worked with?
They're all pretty happy. I will say it's me. I know it shouldn't be me, but the original title for my book was supposed to be Smiling All the Time. Because somebody said on IMDb, there was a thread discussing the Simpsons DVD commentaries, and somebody said, "What's with Mike Reiss? He sounds like he's smiling all the time." And so the editor said, "Let's call your book Smiling All the Time," which to me sounds like one of those books about some brain-dead kid who smiles the whole time.
Well, Mike Reiss is the author of Springfield Confidential. He wrote it with Matthew Klickstein.
Correct.
Yes, and forward by Judd Apatow. Springfield Confidential, Jokes, Secrets, and Outright Lies from a Lifetime Writing for The Simpsons. It is so much fun to read, so much fun to talk to you.
You are a delight. I have fun. If we're still recording, folks, if you're too cheap to buy the book, at least follow me on Twitter.
You're great on Twitter. Yes, Mike Reiss, R-E-I-S-S.
Mike Reiss, writer. That's me. That's what I tell myself. So at Mike Reiss, writer, I'm telling you, you don't have to buy the book, but if you follow me on Twitter, every 20 minutes I'm telling you, buy the book, buy the book. But I give you one good joke a day, just like Jimmy Fallon show.
As you point out, Jimmy's...
Fallon spelled backwards is no laugh.
And next time you come back, if you will, we'll talk about Queer Duck. You didn't do Hard Drinkin' Lincoln, did you?
I sure did. I love Hard.
You did Hard Drinkin' Lincoln.
I'm very proud of Hard Drinkin' Lincoln. We'll do a whole show on Hard Drinkin' Lincoln. You can see them all on YouTube. I'm very proud of it. And believe it or not, there's good historical research in there.
Stay on the line for 1 second, sir.